when we are preparing for a presentation, the first things that we need to do is to attend talks. We cannot give a good presentation unless we know what a good presentation look like, what um, bad presentations look like. Right, Antonio?
Yeah. Well, you'll see some bad presentations. I've seen some pretty bad ones where they've they pretty much have gone. They didn't really take any effort. They kind of just took a whiteboard and they said, you know what, I know the topic. I'll just figure it out as I go. And then they would get up on the board and then they would start like, okay, first you have this. And then they would go back and they would explain something. Wait, we need this. But this isn't quite everything. I think you need a little bit over here to see why we're doing this. And then they would go back and then it would be like, what was I talking about again? Oh, right. It was like, oh, this is hard to watch.
Yeah. So when we say like attend talks, it doesn't have to be the exact topic that you're presenting in. And you don't also don't you also don't have to go in person. There are already a lot of online conferences that provide recordings on YouTube, so you can take advantage of them. Like going to a live event, to an actual present conference in person is really good, but if you can't, then just go on YouTube and look for presentations. And when you are watching them, you need to take notes of how do the speakers start the presentation. So you can see like, do they give motivations of the talk, or like some backgrounds, or some key results? Take notes. And do they also give stories, and what kind of stories are they giving? And then you need to see, how are the slides put together? Are there a lot of formulas? What types of pictures were used, and how many of them do they have? How many lines are on each slide? How many slides per minute? And also, you want the slide to the audience to focus on your content, not just on like your slides trendiness. It's gonna be
Right.
like,
When you talk about their strangeness, you're talking about things that look awkward, such as like something that looks misplaced. Right here on your slides, you have like formulas, pictures, how many line slides per minute. They're all lined up. But you could, if you were to like have them not lined up, or if you were to have them like in funny places, or if you had the title at the bottom, or like those are very obvious things that I don't think most people would do. But there are things that you might see and be like, when you're putting the slide together, you'll be like, something doesn't feel right with how this is put together. That's when somebody's going to be also looking at it and saying like, there's something weird about that slide. And so those are the things that you need to put together, kind of figure out how to make it not look strange. And some of this stuff helps with that. Not entirely everything, but yeah.
yeah, definitely. And then like you need to give an evaluation to the talk. Like some talk are gonna have some evaluation questions that they give, but even if they don't, just take note about yourself to see what did you like about the talk and what you didn't like, what do you think is missing on the talk, and how do you think they should um, improve it. And when you are gonna be preparing your talk on your own, mimic the structure that you like and avoid what you don't like. So definitely don't only just write down what you like. Definitely make sure to write what you don't want to do.
And like a lot of the videos that I edit with you, a lot of what I know about editing comes from a lot of just like watching a lot of videos on YouTube and things like that. Just seeing these videos and then saying like, okay, when I see one of Ans's videos, I'm like, there are things that I know are missing, things that don't look like a good video. And some of them are, those things are just like placement. A lot of it tends to be like when things come in and when they go out. In terms of like a talk, that would be like when you're bringing up a point and when you're having like a graphic show up, something like that. When I create a presentation, I usually go very in depth and I pay a lot of attention. I usually make a lot of slides, but a lot of those slides are just variations on one slide. So then I can make like a phrase show up and then have a graphic show up and then have the graphic go away and have the next phrase show up and then a graphic for that one and then have that graphic go away. And so instead of having the screen like cluttered with a bunch of things, with a bunch of images for each individual point, I'll have it so then each individual point gets its full picture, full size picture, but then it'll go away and the picture will kind of like focus your attention on that one point. And so I'll do a lot of things like that. Or if I do, since I'm in math, we have a lot of stuff where we do equations and we sometimes do manipulation. We do math while we're doing our presentation. And let me tell you, it is hard to do a presentation and try to have people follow the math. So I've been doing things where like I highlight the math that I'm about to change, the parts that I'm about to change, not the entire equation, just the parts that I'm going to change. I'll just highlight this one part. And then I'll change it to red after I change it, and then I'll highlight blue the things that I'm going to change. And so you're constantly seeing like this red thing and this, or you'll start off with the equation and there'll be a blue part and then it'll turn red and it's different, and then another part will be blue, and then that part will change into something that's red, and then another part will be blue telling you I'm going to change this one. So your reader is, or the person watching is not really following. That's something I don't really see too often, but that's kind of an idea of like, how can you improve it? Like things when you're watching a presentation and you're struggling to follow or something like that, you want to do something to improve how you could follow. What would make it easier for you to follow the presentation? That's how you would improve it.
Definitely. And a very important step on the presentation is to know who is your audience, because you want to ensure that your explanations and examples are accessible, interesting, and relevant to the audience. And you need to ask yourself, are you going to go in depth or in breadth? For example, if you're presenting for a class, then you want the talk to be focused. So you are not going to rewrite all the definitions or the theorems that you already learned from the class. You can recap them briefly if you need to, but you should not like spend too much time on them. And if you are presenting at a conference, then the range of knowledge will be very large, so you need to accommodate everyone. So you need to make sure that you explain the keywords as easily as possible. But also there are some advanced researchers that are like waiting for attending your talk, so you need to take the new knowledge. They need to take new knowledge from your talk, so make sure that your slides also have something new that they can get from it.
Yeah, and this is something that I see that happens a lot with things on YouTube. Many times, and on YouTube, you see people who are talking a lot of breath. And so there's a lot of people who, when they put videos on YouTube or Facebook, they rarely go into depth. And there are some very popular shows and podcasts about people going in depth. But something that would be going in depth is you might have like an hour or 2 hour long interview where you can spend the time to ask the questions, or even spending that same amount of time on a single topic. So that might be something where you're going in depth, where you might spend sometime kind of going over some breath stuff, but you're expecting your audience to know who you're interviewing, and then going into that. Your examples were just about the academic setting, but it does apply to any sort of thing, like any sort of video you would do. You might also have a breath where kind of thing where you're talking about a lot of different people in this area rather than one specific person, or you might be giving an introductory talk about something, but then the one thing I've noticed is that in YouTube, people there rarely go in depth. And so it's a big area that people don't focus on. Um, there are a lot of people who do breath on YouTube, and that's a lot of the like really big popular ones. But the ones who go in depth, like, and math is one of those areas where uh, you see people like they start talking about algebra. Lots of people talking about how to do like manipulation with equations, but very few of them are going in depth, and they're assuming that their audience has a lot of knowledge, and then they're going into there. Now, I would definitely say if you want to have something that's very in depth like that, for something like YouTube, you may also want to have some breath ones that came before that. But one of those breath videos, and then have like links or a link to a series about a lot of depth videos. So but I don't really see a lot of that in things like YouTube, and much less Facebook. Facebook, there's virtually none. So, but there's a need for that.
Yeah, so let's talk about presenting for a class. The most important thing is if it is like a part of your grades, then ask your teacher, because the teacher who made the assignment knows best about what they think are great presentations. And I told you before that I've had like a presentation that went terribly wrong. I was taking a class, and this class have two midterms and a presentation. So that's all of the grades are made up. There is no homework or something like that. And I did really, really well in the two midterms. And when I was working on my final project, I was just asking the teachers, like, yeah, do you think this idea is good? And they say, like, yes, it's great. And then I work on my own, and I did the paper, I did the presentation, and then he graded it, and he gave it like 80 over 100, and he 80%. Said like 80%, and he said like, yeah, your presentation is too short. And I felt like really bad, because then he gave me like my final grade ended up being 89%, which is like 1 point to an A. And he didn't give me A, he gave me B, and I was devastated. I was totally, totally disappointed, because I know that I know the materials, but I also take it as a lesson for me in the future that I need to ask about what the teacher's expectation were. I just don't uh, assume that I know what to do. I need to ask.
Yeah, and again, yours are kind of like the academic setting. In terms of like just getting something out there. If you're you may also, that would be the equivalent of that would be like beta testing or editors.
Yeah.
Having them look at it, and there are people who know the audience, people who are the audience, and you can have a few of them kind of give you an idea of like, is this going to be something good? Did you skip over something? Did you need more detail? Did you need less detail? So.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's almost always some sort of person who you can ask. This teacher is going to just be representing those people.
Yeah, so here's like a list of questions that you can ask them. So know before you are going to give a talk, whether it's a whiteboard or slides. You don't want to be preparing for a slides and then out of a sudden it is a whiteboard presentations and there is no projectors or anything, and then everything that you've been planning before is gonna fall on the ground because you didn't plan for a whiteboard presentation.
Yeah.
The next question is, how long will I present? If you don't know how long you are gonna be presenting, ever you are gonna be under delivering like what I did in my class, or you are gonna prepare more materials than you need, and then you are gonna think like, I need to speak quickly so that I can cover all of these things that I have been planning for in this very short amount of time, and none of these are good.
Yeah, a lot of that tends to be when people are doing multiple presentations in 1 hour. That's usually, or one time period. That's usually when you run into this, how long am I going to be presenting for? There's also sometimes issues where, like, if there's multiple people presenting, then it might also be that, part they may run long and you might have to spend less time during your presentation, or maybe they had been planning a introductory talk that isn't on the schedule and you may need to look at that too. So there's a lot of things that could influence. I saw a video once of this talk, and they spent 15 minutes introducing the person, and I was floored at how long it was taking for them to, like, say this person's name, say some, and then invite them up onto the stage. And they were just like talking. They kind of like rambled off into a story. And I was like, "Oh, this is a really long time. I hope the presenter was prepared for this." But
And how long was the talk?
It was a 2 hour long talk, I think, or it was either an hour or two. I think it was 2 hours long.
Okay, so yeah.
I mean, it was long form anyway, and he also rambled.
Yeah, you also need to ask, what do you want to see in my presentation? Like, do you want data, graphs, codes, and all of those supporting materials that you can have? And very important, know what books or articles should you use. There are some teachers that say like, you should only look at this book and this is the only book that I want you to take things from. That's the only book that I want you to reference from. There are some teachers who are gonna say like, okay, I just want it to be factually correct and give your reference. So know beforehand which one of this.
Yeah, when I was in high school, grades 9 through 12, a lot of teachers, they didn't want me to reference something like Wikipedia. But then afterward, I think in college, I think they still don't really like you to reference Wikipedia, but it's more acceptable nowadays. Oh, but what also happens is during that, if somebody doesn't accept the Wikipedia reference, sometimes it will also have references to good material that you can also use. So it usually you can take whatever you were referencing and you can find what would I say, more source material, references that are closer to the source of the information. Sometimes you do that and you actually find something that contradicts it. That's just one of the reasons why people look for you to not reference things like Wikipedia. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. There's a lot of false references. Somebody might have just misquoted something, and then that misquote gets reused, and people get confused. I don't know if you guys had this one, but like there's a quote that had happened where it's like, people only use 10% of our brain. Do you have that?
No.
Oh, yeah. So here in America, it might just be an American thing. We had we had some sort of research happening. I don't know what it was, but I remember it was misquoted and people interpreted it as, uh, oh, I think I remember. The brain uses 10% of the human energy, and people interpreted that as the brain uses 10% of its power, or only 10% of the brain is being used. And basically, that's what the quote that happened that caught on. And so now people hear, like, there's this misconception that people hear or people use only 10% of their brain, and think of how much smarter you would be if you were to use all 100% of your brain. And there's a lot of like movies and things like, okay, we eat this pill and then we unlock the other 90% of our brain. But it actually came from this quote that the brain, where it was like this estimate of the brain using 10% of the energy that we eat. I think it's actually closer to 20%. But that was a misquote that people used, and now it's very common knowledge that people use only 10% of their brain, but that knowledge is wrong, and it comes from the quote. But you have to go back to your source, to the source, and that's kind of what some people are looking for. Can you quote somebody and say, like, this is what they're saying and this is what they say is true,
Yeah.
rather than just going like, this is what people know.
Yeah. And if a presentation is going to be graded, you need to know if there is a rubric. It's definitely easier to get a good grades and to not go out of topic if you have a clear rubric that you need to follow.
Yeah, not all teachers give a rubric, but you can usually, in America at least, it's very common to give a rubric because there's a lot of push towards standardizing like how we're looking. There's many teachers, especially in Madagascar or a while ago in the United States, we used to do this too, but it's a lot more, they were doing a lot more subjective. Like, you can tell a bad presentation by looking at it, which, yes, you can. But also by creating a rubric, you're taking it apart and you're saying, this is this is one thing, like how are the slides put together? How do I judge if that is good or bad? How is the talk? How is that on a scale of like 1 to 5 or something like that? But that's what the rubric does. It breaks down each of the areas that you would look at for a talk, and it is saying how good was the quality of that particular piece.
Yeah.
So that's what the rubric is.
And also, if possible, ask for feedback. You can ask the teacher, like, would you be willing to review my draft before the presentation?
Yeah, especially if your teacher doesn't give you a rubric or somebody doesn't give you like guidelines to follow, if you don't have something like that, feedback is especially important because this will basically be your only way to kind of review how am I doing when I give my talk. Like, what needs improvement, not the syntax or grammar, the things that you could just um, go through and easily check. But these are things that are like, how does it feel to listen to my talk?
Yeah.
Those are things that you can only really get through feedback. It can sound great in your head, but then when you talk it out, you give this and someone gives you feedback, you can really get an idea of like, okay, I really shouldn't have mentioned this thing before because it's almost like you're talking about something and it seems to flow, and then you have to jump back and say, by the way, I need to mention this. And it's like those are, you may not say it like, I'll need to go back and mention this, but it may be that the feedback is like, hey, you mentioned this thing, so then you can use it, but you really shouldn't have used it earlier. So
Hey, Fa. And also ask if you should submit some supplementary documents like paper or report or article.
Yeah, this is usually when you're doing something, a presentation on a specific item, like usually your own paper, or it could be that you are explaining a particular paper to a small group of people and you want them to know the original document, but those things are like when the entire presentation is mainly based around that one document, or you're giving a briefing,
Yeah.
something where all of the information in your talk is condensed into uh, a single document,
Yes.
not necessarily written by yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes you are also asked to provide like a handout for the attendees. So ask like way before the deadline. And still on that topic, ask if there is a template that you should follow. That's very important. There are some there are some teachers or some seminars that expected everybody to follow the same thing. It's like you need to start with a story, or you need to start with the background materials, or you need to start with a literature review. So you need to know if there are some templates that is expected for you.
Yeah. And there's generally some sort of form that people are expecting, even if they don't directly give you a template. There's usually some sort of form that is standard in that area.
So don't feel bad about asking your teacher in each phase of the project because, as I said before, it's gonna save you a lot of trouble. It's gonna help you not do things that you are not supposed to do.